Alrighty, everybody, welcome to Wolf Tracks. You are officially on camera. Please keep that in mind, but I will remind you. As you already know, I am Page Shepard, and I'm a canine psychopomp Folkentera who's been in the community since 2014. You might recognize me from past OtherCon lectures, or more relevantly, as the founder of the Alterhuman Archive. Don't you call me a gray muzzle in those comments. I can still read them at this point in time. Today, I'm going to be running over the basics for the different types of archives you can create and host in the community, or that you can make for your own personal use. And I'm also going to be going over some other important information about archival work that we don't normally see talked on in, like, the other lectures and panels we have kind of related to the topic of archival work, of which there have been many because we're a fantastic and enthusiastic community. So, before we formally begin, here are the basic reminders. 1. This lecture will be recorded. Everyone say hi, YouTube! Everything that you say in chat is also being recorded alongside this, so just keep that in mind when you are talking. As always, I typically won't be able to respond to messages during the course of the lecture. I'm going to be reading from my script, though I do have it and the messages side by side. So if you at me, I'll see it, but please, only do that for an emergency. Like you're telling me that, the entirety of Discord is caught on fire and you think I'm dead, There will be one exception for that rule, and that will be in the slide following this one, in which I will ask for audience participation. But you'll see that when we get there. Don't worry about it right this second. And last but not least, please be considerate to your fellow congoers. We're all here to have a good time. So, before we go any further, and I have this nice black slide here as like a rest point, I want to ask everybody, what do you think of archivists? What do you think of the archival profession? I'm not asking you to define them, just tell me what you personally think and feel about them. Please type it in chat. I want to see your answers. I see archivists are sexy. I see important. I see good. I see cool as fuck. I see, wow, oh my god, that's a lot. Okay, excellent. I'm seeing a lot of positive things. Okay, goated? Hell yeah. I was gonna give you guys a minute, but I don't even think I need to. Holy shit. They are hungry. We are. Intelligent, necessary, based. Again, I love being described as based. Okay, awesome. I'm so glad. Okay, here's my next question that I also want you guys to answer. Are archivists evil? I like seeing all the yeses and then the no's and then the maybes. Okay, excellent. Glad. So, the answer to that question, for folks wondering, is generally no, but they definitely can be. In an ideal world, the purpose of archival work is to strengthen collective memory and protect people's rights, property, and identity, to quote the Society of American Archivists, who, if you're interested in archival work as an American, I do recommend checking out their website after this panel. It's very useful and interesting. But how that actually manifests is a little bit more complicated. Obligatory disclaimer that what I'm about to say here is far, far more relevant to archives that are state-sponsored, that have government recognition and support, rather than a lot of the type of archives we'll be going over today. However, it's still really important to remember, archival absence is real and bias is inescapable. Archival absence is exactly what it sounds like. When specific types of materials or information are conspicuously missing from an archive. This can be unintentional, unconscious bias, or an active choice, but it results in the same thing either way. Specific people are excluded from the archival records, or end up nameless, faceless blobs who aren't properly attributed. You'll find this most often happening to marginalized groups, especially in state-sponsored archives. They just won't be there, like, at all. The Library of Congress in America is probably one of the most relevant examples of this for my audience, because I know a lot of you are American. Despite having almost 1 million pictures of the Civil War, 1 million, that's 1,000,000, you'll find that its photographs of African Americans during the Civil War comes with the disclaimer, quote, "Images of African American soldiers are not well represented in P&P files. Rather, most photographs show African Americans as civilians, attached to the military, and as contraband and refugees." End quote. This makes no sense, given the African American soldiers were a major part of the Civil War, because it was about the slavery of African American people. Like, hello? But it's an instance of archival absence that I think a lot of Americans in the audience will be immediately familiar with. Once it's pointed out, you immediately recognize it, that you haven't really seen those pictures. And it's not a unique example. We see this sort of thing happening all over the world, in every country, and it's just the tip of the iceberg to what we're talking about happening here. For more reading specifically on anti-Blackness within global photographic archives, which is a very, very large and in-depth topic, I'd recommend checking out Morte Vivum, Photography and the Politics of the Visual by Kimberly Juanita Brown. I see a comment that history is written by white supremacist men, and that is accurate, but it goes beyond that. You know? At a certain point, it becomes a systematic issue, and that also has to be recognized too. Archival work, I've come to realize, functions a lot like statistics. People can use it to lie very easily and very convincingly. But unlike stats, not a lot of people know this because archives have a status and a reputation for being trustworthy based on their purposes and mission statements. Like I asked you guys earlier when I asked how you feel about archives. Everyone feels great about them. Their missions are typically very noble. I mean, especially for those of us who are parts of groups like queer folks, POC, folks of minority religious groups. Sometimes archives are the only reason we have our history, and that's devastating. On their face, all archives look like a good thing, and archival work is just incredibly essential, and most individual archivists are trying to achieve exactly what they set out to do with preservation of information and history. But, depending on the nature of an archive, it can tell a wholly different story from what actually happened or was relevant historically. Major players in important events can be erased or mischaracterized. Huge sections can be left out or glossed over to make them seem more unimportant than they actually were. And whole groups of people can be portrayed more as inactive objects who just happen to be around at the specific times and places, rather than intentional participants. The ways for things to be misrepresented seems almost endless, and sometimes it's a very intentional choice. To use another American example, we're currently seeing queer resources and information being quietly removed or rewritten from government archives, or they're left hovering in a semi-permanent sealed, classified, or otherwise unavailable status. This is going to be relevant for the next slide, but the important thing to recognize here is that it's not that these sources don't exist. It's that they're being quietly hidden or pushed to the side in ways that make them difficult to use. This obviously isn't because the topic is inapplicable to Americans. It's instead due to the rise of authoritarianism and fascism in the country. Make it seem as though queer people are just a fad or some sort of extreme outlier that don't deserve consideration. It's also, very conveniently for the folks in charge, hiding the ways that the federal government has historically discriminated against queer Americans in an attempt to make it harder to point out these patterns of animus, especially in legal settings. Archive activist groups such as the Mattachine Society of Washington, D.C. partner with lawyers and legal professionals to take action to rescue and reveal the documents and information that are otherwise being intentionally concealed. This is a long-standing sort of legal activist movement as well, through using the Freedom of Information Act requests and other sort of pressure tactics on government entities to demand that they share what happened to these resources. If you'd like to read more on acts of resistance by archivists related to queer identity and a study that argues for depoliticizing archival processes, check out What is Lost in Restoring Truth and Sanity, Queer Approaches to Absence, Silence, and Erasure in Archival Description by Evan M. Allgood and Travis L. Wagner. I thought it was a fantastic resource, and it is very relevant here. Archive your grandma's pastry recipes. Absolutely! I archive everything. It is so easy for things to just become lost over the years, and for things to even be intentionally hidden, like we're seeing here. To be clear, though, just because an archive is missing information doesn't necessarily mean it's intentionally trying to obfuscate it. Archives, like all things, have limitations in scope, in financial capability, and in manpower. The smaller or more niche the archive, the tighter the financial and manpower limitations tend to be. The larger and more state-sponsored or government-recognized the archive, the tighter the scope tends to be. It's kind of a catch-22. But archives can be abused and can unintentionally mislead you, and this is something important to keep in mind, both when building your own and exploring others. When someone controls the documentation of history, they control the narrative, which shapes not only our past, but our present and our future as well. An archive will never show you the entire story, because it is almost always physically impossible for them to do so. There will inevitably be things that fall through the cracks, that are just outside their scope, or which they don't have the space to hold. Be suspicious of any collection that claims otherwise, and recognize the limitations in your own works as well. If someone claims to be a complete history of the altered human community, for instance, that's a red flag. There is no such thing as a complete history of the altered human community when we're going forward every day in time. The community is constantly evolving, and that's part of what makes it impossible to have one finished archive of anything. The passage of time doesn't really allow for it when the community is still ongoing and exists. Not unless it's dedicated to one specific person or one very small point in time. Bias is something that all archives have to deal with, both internal and external. While I think we're all very familiar with the concept of internal biases, another thing you need to contend with when using and building archives is the circumstances around the archival work. Things can't be archived if they don't exist, were actively destroyed, or were simply lost. This can severely limit what even a well-intentioned archive can include in its collection, because it simply isn't there to include. Sometimes this happens through no fault of someone's own. Damage caused by natural disasters, or the eventual degradation or corruption of the archived works themselves, for instance. Other times, it's an accident. Something is exposed to light when it shouldn't have been, or it was moved in a way that the handler didn't realize would damage or even delete the works they were handling. And yeah, still sometimes else, it's fully intentional. We all know what book burnings and book bans are. And while this is technically different from a resource being hidden, in some ways you could also argue that the archival loss I'm talking about here is the inevitable end-stage result for someone trying to bury records. Eventually, with enough time, it just results in the materials becoming inaccessible due to either being lost or being corrupted from not being taken care of. For an example that's actually relevant to our community, people will often find it difficult to locate in-depth historical accounts of non-earthen animal therianthropes. This isn't because they didn't exist. This is because they were actively pushed out and discouraged from participating in the community as gatekeepers over the years put more and more pressure to shrink the definition of therianthrope and push them out of the community. With more people leaving and not more resources being made, the older sources succumb to link rot and decay. It's a form of survivorship bias where the grilling and gatekeeping of old changed the landscape of a term by pushing people out. And over time, it made it seem like they were never there in the first place. Dosky's panel, yeah, Dosky, I'm talking about you. Therian, Dispelling the Earth and Animal Myth, goes into great detail on the history of the misinformation campaign and the ways that the altered definition has been weaponized. And it is, I think, a great example of what I was talking about earlier with the ways our history shapes our present and our future. I'd highly recommend it for anyone who hasn't seen or read it already. It is a great resource, and Dosky did a lot of work putting it together. Highly, highly recommend. But even while we acknowledge the effects of external biases, we still have to point out that there's no single person on the planet who doesn't have an internal bias in some way, shape, or form. It doesn't make you evil, but it's a fact of life that you're gonna have to tangle with at some point when building your own archive, and when you're deciding what it will entail. There will inevitably be groups and people who you staunchly disagree with, but who still fall within your archival scope. Maybe they're dying on a hill you think is ridiculous. Maybe they hold cruel, discriminatory perspectives, or they're a part of bigoted groups. Maybe you've got personal beef, or maybe they don't even go here. Whatever the reason, you still need to look inward and decide not only where you draw your lines in the sand, but more importantly, why. What are the reasons you're including certain people or information but excluding others? Are you prepared to defend your choices? Understanding the benefits and consequences to these types of decisions will not only help you build a better archive, but it'll also make you more able to recognize why other archives are making those same decisions. Garfield W. If you exclude someone from an archive because you think their opinions or associations are dangerous, then you don't risk platforming them. But you do risk information about them from the horse's mouth being lost, and that can be a whole nother can of worms. If the group tries to erase their negative associations and opinions, not because they've changed, but simply for optics, then there's no longer proof that they held them in the first place. If the group causes trouble and then dies out, but a suspiciously similar one crops up later on, you won't have any evidence of the historical patterns from the first group, or of any potential connections between the two. And you'll find these conundrums for every example I listed. If you don't include someone's work just because you don't like them as a person, that's inherently just kind of shitty, but you could also make the argument that it's respecting the other person's boundaries. It's a tightrope to walk. Do you include the work of someone who you think is a fuckhead, even though it might escalate the negative feelings between you two? If you don't include someone's work because they're not part of the in-group, you risk insulating the archive from external information that could be useful. And you could even end up excluding sources from authors that become a part of the in-group later on. You miss out on perspectives that might not otherwise be accessible to you. And if you don't include someone just because you think they're ridiculous or have wrong opinions, while you could argue that your collection is simply curated, it can also be pointed out that you're instituting a bar for entry that explicitly discourages diversity and causes you to lose out on valuable information across a wider range of subjects. It's like the inbreeding of archival work, and it's just going to make things ugly. I want to be clear. While I've gone in-depth on some of the issues and pitfalls that archival work has, that doesn't make it any less valuable. Archives are our very first defense against collective memory loss through the preservation of history. They're invaluable to understanding not only the whys, but the hows, the wheres, and whens of the landscape we find ourselves in. They offer information and context at times that are otherwise lost to us, but which have nonetheless shaped the world around us. For our communities in particular, archives are essential to helping preserve information against link rot and to not let trolls or bad faith gatekeepers change the history and narrative of who we are. The things that were once commonplace knowledge can vanish far faster than you think, especially if they're so commonplace that people only think to mention them in a handful of writings that then disappear without a trace, or if people are intentionally trying to push a conflicting narrative. There's also the simple fact that no one else is recording our accounts except for us. If you don't preserve the materials that matter to you, if you don't save a copy of your favorite Alterhuman essay, game, video, website, lecture, whatever, one day it may very well become lost media right before your eyes. With that sombering fact in mind, we can now move on to how to build your own archives, the actual point of this panel. Never forget, kids, 2 cakes are always better than 1, and I hope by the end of this you will each be inspired to make a fucking cake. I'm stopping to take a sip of my cider. So, so before you start getting up to your arms in paper or wires, you need to suss out 3 major factors for the archive you want to build. Your scope, your organization, and your hosting. Your scope is defining the boundaries of what you're actually archiving. This includes obvious stuff like the topic, but less obvious features like the formats, the boundaries for what counts and what doesn't. Like we already covered, maybe you can't or don't want to include items from specific sources, like a certain website or author, or maybe you really only want to archive things related to a super niche period in time, like the early 2000s grilling period we kind of touched on earlier. Whatever it is, this is what is going to make up your collection, and you need to define this before you can actually start planning for your sorting and collecting efforts. This is also really important because sometimes you will find that over time, more websites will crop up that are relevant to the topic scope, but not relevant to the format scope. This happened with the Alter Human archive and sort of microblogging popularity. It's not fully within our scope to archive microblogging platforms because they're very ephemeral, and some of them are explicitly built to not be archived. That's a very common issue with Twitter. Twitter accounts, once they get to a certain age, previous posts are just kind of completely inaccessible. And there's not really a great way to go around that because of how the platform is built and managed by Elon Musk. Oh, sorry, it's called X now, I forgot. Whatever, you get what I mean. That's why it's important to define this ahead of time, because the things around you will change, and you will have to deal with that as they change. So if you already have your rules and your understanding for what you can handle and what you can't handle in place, that kind of makes it easier when things crop up. Yeah, I dead named Twitter, my bad. Your organization is how you'll sort things. You can use a specific labeling system, like the Dewey Decimal System is one example of this, for example, or you can assign multiple tags to each entry. You can group by folders, subfolders, and series in a hierarchy, and you can also sort things by date, subject, author, location, source, and the like. The possibilities are endless, but make sure that whatever you use is sustainable as your collection grows. For archives, you're typically going to see a hierarchy plus some sort of tagging or categorization system, and more important, standout pieces in the collection might also have a summarized description. I highly recommend building your organization based on your scope. I don't know if Poppy shared his folklore organization in the public channels or the private ones. Poppy, am I allowed to talk about that, or was that put in the panelist chat? I just thought it was a really great example. Okay, awesome. Okay, so Poppy sorted by since Poppy's looking into multiple different sources and multiple different topics on folklore, Poppy cited by location and time period, if I remember correctly. But mostly location, because you're trying to compare these different sources around the same sort of areas. And I thought that was really fascinating and really cool and a great example of building your organization for what you're trying to accomplish. Don't think that you have to organize something in the same way that, like, AO3 does, or in the same way that, like, the Alter Human Archive does, for instance, folks. Build it to how it will be helpful for you. That is the most important thing. And sometimes you may need to sit and, like, figure that out, but that's okay. But if you don't do this, you will find yourself in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years, having to redo the entire fucking archive. And that sucks. So don't do it. You have been warned, okay? And last but not least, there's hosting. That's just figuring out where you want your collection stored and how. You can store things digitally or physically, which each have their own unique requirements, but you also need to decide if you want your archive to be private or publicly accessible. Both of which are fine, but they both need totally different storage methods to some degree. Or, well, hosting methods, not storage methods. Figuring out these things ahead of time will save you an enormous amount of trouble later on. You do not want to be in a situation where you have to rebuild your archive from scratch because you didn't plan ahead. Take it from literally every archivist here. You don't want to do that. Please. So, for personal archives, personal archives are also going to be called private archives in this. So we'll start with looking at them because I think they're more doable for pretty much everybody here. They can be smaller or larger in scope than community archives because it can functionally be whatever you want it to be. You're not doing this for anyone but yourself when it comes to a personal archive. So sometimes your scope is literally just shit you like and want to keep track of. Music, books, movies, games, you name it. This is awesome, but it also means you're going to be handling your collection a little bit differently than you would for a public archive. Everything's going to be stored in your home, probably, either physically or digitally. When it comes to digital storage, I always recommend that you use external storage methods rather than relying on cloud storage. Cloud storage is just someone else's computer, and you'll be beholden to both your internet access and the cloud provider. I will say that you can use it as a redundancy. This is great in cases of things like natural disasters, a house fire, a hurricane, something that destroys your entire home. It does work good as a redundancy there. But primarily, you don't want to be beholden to the cloud storage's rules, regulations, and downtime, the requirement of internet connection to get to your stuff, Redundancy is your friend, like Kai says in the comments. Redundancy is never a bad thing. Ideally, you should have 3 levels of redundancy. You should put it in 3 separate places, everything you have. That's the ideal. Realistically, I know that most of you probably will not do that, but consider it. There's also physical storage. We'll get into that in the next slide. It's kind of complicated, but you can do physical storage too. Even though the prices in HDDs and SSDs have skyrocketed due to data center demands, they are still the most recommended tech for this purpose. They have a much longer shelf life than CDs, USBs, or SD cards, and they are a lot harder to lose or break. You can use other options in a pinch, but they're not long-term solutions, and you will eventually need to upgrade. It's just kind of the facts of the matter. Physical media creation and storage for personal archives is complicated. You will need a printer for this, just heads up. I didn't include it in my lecture notes or in the slide, but because I figured it was obvious, but I am going to mention it. You will need a printer for this. Make sure that you use archival grade materials for anything you make or print, otherwise you'll find your collection degrading as time goes on. If you're not sure whether something you want to use is archival grade or not, just Google it. You can look it up. There's a lot of information on what is or isn't archival grade. Hey Paige, when are you going to print out the Alter Human Archive and bind it in a book? Eventually, probably. Generally, you'll find that archival quality materials are acid-free to help avoid chemically destroying things over time, though, as a rule. Also, if you can, try to keep stuff in temperature-controlled and low humidity environments. It's not always possible. I live in Florida, so, fighting humidity is a losing battle for me. But if you can do it, do it. It will make things last a lot longer. For printed papers, which is what I imagine most of us will be dealing with, binders and folders are great for small-scale organizing tools, while totes and filing cabinets can be used for larger-scale sorting and storage. If you are extremely ambitious, underline that twice, you can look into bookbinding as a method for preservation. My personal resources for bookbinding are the Renegade Bindery Discord and the 4 Keys Book Arts Bookbinding Basic Series. That is where I learned to bookbind. I highly recommend them, especially 4 Keys. I think that hand-on, step-by-step approach is so great for understanding how books are put together. But like I said, that's if you're extremely ambitious. It's not that hard, but it is pretty time-consuming. For digital personal archives, there's a variety of digital organization tools you can use to assist in sorting and tagging everything. However, it's extremely important to remember that your files will outlast your software choices. Look me in my eye sockets. Your files will outlast your software choices. Whatever software you use for organization, make sure it's something you will be able to pull the data out of later when you need to upgrade. If you stick to native folder hierarchy systems of organization, the ones that are just built into your computer, you can avoid this problem. But a lot of people really do enjoy software organization for the benefits. It is very nice to use. I also need to stress that there are so many options for organization tools out here. What I'm showing here is a drop in the bucket, and I really strongly encourage you to do your own research. That's also part of why I'm not going to deep dive in each of these individually. The presentation is available for download, so check them out. Like, these are things that I've either had personally recommended to me or which I've used myself. I've used Calibre, Obsidian, and I think I used Hydrus Network a really long time ago. Calibre is great because you can download the information from it. Obsidian's just really nice. I think everybody loves Obsidian. I don't know anyone who doesn't. Hydrus is a little... No, I don't think everybody will like Hydrus, but I put it on there because a lot. If you like it, if you like Boru-like tools, you'll enjoy it. Just whatever you choose, make sure that it works for you. A shiny piece of software won't do you any good if it doesn't actually assist you in keeping track of or organizing your collection. Just remember that. For a personal archive that you want to share with others, but you don't want to rely on cloud storage for, you'll have to self-host on your own network-attached server, or NAS, which is basically just a hard drive that's attached to and accessible by your network. While this sounds initially intimidating and can be really expensive if you want to buy an NAS outright, you can always take advantage of old desktops and laptops you have lying around to convert them into a new server. There are tons of guides out here for doing so, and I've linked a few here that really helped me to understand the concept. It is kind of technical, but you will be able to get into it if you do just do the reading. Shout out specifically to Dragon for the suggestion to include self-hosting in the panel, and who gave me the resources for the guides on the laptop and PC. Something to keep in mind if you're pursuing this option. There's a little star thing on this. People recommend doing this with desktops over laptops 100% of the time. The resource I have here on laptop server conversion goes into it a little bit, but the crux is that laptops really are not built for 24/7 use. They heat up more, they consume more power, and they have a higher risk of just failing outright. Some people say they're fine as a temporary solution, but just don't work well as a permanent one, so keep that in mind before you start converting your laptop. And last but not least on the personal archive section, I want everyone to say it with me. Piracy is preservation! We love you, pirates! There is so much media that only still exists today because someone found it worthwhile to pirate and preserve a copy of it in their personal collection. While I am not legally able to tell you to go out there and commit crimes, and if anybody asks, I'm not doing that, always keep in mind the debt we owe to pirates everywhere and make your own responsible decisions. Thank you to everyone who sails the seven seas and the Grand Line alike. Oh, and that little heart locket where we say we heart pirates with a picture of Nosferatu. The only reason we have Nosferatu is because it was pirated. That's the only reason. Yeah, wait, for real. Yeah, I'm not kidding. Absolutely, yes. And now we get to move on to public archives. Public archives are archives that are built for the public. I know this is a very shocking definition. I'm sure none of you saw that coming. If you aim to have a physical public archive, that is a really complicated can of worms that you are opening up. But it can be done if you really, really, really want to do that. In my opinion, your best bet is to rope your local library, queer co-op, or any other third space you're active into it. Locally owned bookstores might be willing to help you as well. You'll have to physically set it up at their location, have a clear organizing system, but this can be an easy way to give public access to your archive without compromising your own home and space. If you have a very small and hardy collection that you can easily travel with, you could even do like a Scholastic book fair type setup once or twice a month and make like an event out of people coming by and interacting with or contributing things. Your options are really going to vary depending on like where you're at and what's around you and what you actually have. So like that's why these suggestions are kind of broad. It's really going to depend. A little free library might also be an option if your archive is made up of like small, easily replaced contents that you want to spread far and wide, like zines. The one downside is that a little free library, typically you have to own the property, if I remember right, to install one. And I don't think a lot of us are homeowners, to be honest. I just don't think a lot of us really are. For digital public archives, you're probably going to be looking at either a website or a public storage system of some kind, usually something that will be cloud-based. It's still recommended if you do that you keep copies stored digitally offline. Like this is another thing for redundancy. Always try to keep stuff taken offline too that you have access to. With website archives, there's a few things you have to consider. The benefits are you have much more control over how your website looks and functions. You can have additional web pages and information, things like a contact or an affiliates page, for instance, and you can sometimes get plugins and JavaScript features that help with organization. The cons are that free websites typically limit these options and may not give you access to any plugins or allow you to edit your site's JavaScript. I know that NeoCities, for instance, does not allow you to edit JavaScript, I don't think, unless you're a subscriber. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a few years. No, you can? Oh, okay. No Neos. Who am I thinking of? I'm thinking of one of the free options. I don't remember which one I'm thinking of then. Maybe NecoWeb. WordPress is really bad. WordPress will not let you use a lot of stuff unless you're, like, paying. That is true. Squarespace, yeah. But if you're tech savvy enough, you can also just self-host. Like, that is an option. I am not going into detail here because I don't have the technical know-how for it. From what I understand, it still requires you to set up your own home server, and it's not actually that hard. I just don't know the process, so I can't guide you through it. There are some examples I have for the website archives for free to paid options. NecoWeb, we all love NecoWeb. NeoCities, we all love NeoCities. WordPress is there. Lurk, you know. And I'd also recommend checking out 32-Bit Cafe's resource list for the personal web if you are building a website. It is so ridiculously useful. I wish I had had that when I was building my website. I wish so badly I'd had that. In comparison, storage archives just need to be built around the organization hierarchy and tagging system if applicable. You don't have to make a connecting website to it, but a lot of people do. These types of archives are just faster to make and maintain, and updating them with new entries is a lot easier. However, cloud storage usually comes with a monthly fee, and you have to abide by stricter rules for what is or isn't allowed to be hosted on the platform. If you are hosting pirated materials, this is an especially risky choice to make, so just consider yourselves warned and be as responsible as you can. I've also got some examples for storage archive options there, but I think most of us know them. Like Dropbox is pretty famous, Google Drive is pretty well known. I think Proton Drive is really coming up. And I feel like most people will have heard of Mega. With that said, though, I would definitely recommend considering including some of the additional things I have listed here for whichever you go, because these are kind of, in a lot of ways, pretty essential, or at least the first couple are. A contact information page for takedown requests, submittals, and questions is just essential for if someone's like trying to leave the community and doesn't want their stuff hosted anywhere. or if someone feels that their writing is no longer accurate to themselves and doesn't want it posted up for other people to read, or just, or even if someone's being like, hey, you have an older version of my essay from like 2020, but this is the updated version from 2025, please use this instead. Let people be able to get in contact with you. Like, you don't need to be posting your phone number up for people to be texting you, but put an email. It is free to make an email address. Make an email and put it on there. I'd also recommend, this is where we have opposing ethics. I think all of it should be archived. Poppy, that's totally fair. The idea for where to draw those lines is everyone's choice to make. That is a big part of it. But also, the contact information is important for people sending you things. So that's why I still advocate. You gotta have it. You gotta let people be able to reach out. I also recommend a page for general information on the archive's scope or purpose. Like, you want people to very easily and quickly be able to understand what you're trying to do. So just have a little brief page, a little brief blurb somewhere on it about it. In theory, I'd want everything to be archived, but I don't know if I'd actually want to do that in practice. Fair! Honestly, fair. Yeah. Some optional things are you can include a resources or information page listing basic definitions or external resources. Optional. You could have an affiliates, partners, or associated organizations list. Optional, but very fun. You can have a roadmap or updates page. Once again, optional, but pretty fun, and it lets you actually physically see like where you've come from and where you've been, which is kind of cool. And you can also add in a funny JPEG. It's only optional if you're a square. Otherwise, what is the point of doing this? Like, come on, man. And by now you might be wondering, where do I even find the alter-human shit I'm looking for anyway? Well, lucky for you, and lucky for me, because I get to pass the buck. Dosky did a whole lecture on archival web hunting back at OtherCon 2024. Go check out Exploring the Old Web, Archiving and You for more information on hunting down niche alter-human sources. Spoiler alert, but the Internet Archive will quickly become your best friend. That's not a spoiler alert. You guys probably already knew that. Everyone donate to the Internet Archive right now! Yes! Now, I recognize that was kind of a lot of information to dump on you all, but with this power, you can not only go out there and make your own archives, but you can dissect the archives you come across to get a better understanding of how they function, and if you want to incorporate similar things into your own archives. I mean this in the nicest way possible. Please steal the things you like from other websites as inspiration. If you see that one of the alter-human archives out there does something in a way you really, really like, steal it! Oh my god, steal it! Take it! Holy shit, just take it! Like, please, please steal from us. We are not like the information or ideas police. We want to share these with you. Please steal the things you like. Hashtag I love theft. But only of ideas. Don't tell any lawyers I said that. And you can do this you can break down things in really simple ways. I wanted to show an example of the now defunct Where Library Archive as just like a quick breakdown example. It's got a scope of writings on therianthropy. It's built on the WordPress engine. It uses categories based on topic, type, and format to categorize things. And even though the site is technically defunct, it has been preserved by the Internet Archive, and you can still go into it and check it out in your web browser to see how it feels and use to explore it. The more time you spend looking at archives, the more you'll learn about how you want your own archive to be. So look and steal, oh my god, please! Also, did you know the Where Library ran for 18 years? Fun fact. I thought that was really cool when I was making this slide, so I put it in there. Yeah, 18! It was old enough to fucking vote! There was actually also a Where Library before this one, but they were separate projects from everything I read. What about Project Shift? I don't know. I think Project Shift is the same, but don't quote me on that. I didn't check. And since I just told you to go out to Alter Human archives and steal the sort of like things you like in them, here's the actual Alter Human archives that I know of for you to go explore and see how they do what they do and what you like or what you don't like. We have obviously the Alter Human archive. I made that with a bunch of help from other people. Actually, I don't even want to claim I made it anymore. That's very much a group effort. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Holy shit. There's Alter Human Zines, which is made solely by Nova, and it's very swag. It is hosted on NecaWeb, and it shows a whole bunch of Alter Human Zines. Like, I think several hundreds, if I'm right. Nova, correct me, but it's like an amazing collection. It's so cool. There's Library of Medusa, which is another like general archive, Alter Human archive, but tries to focus more on things that haven't already been archived. There's Wonder Trading, which is specifically an archive that does stuff regarding Pokemon Alter Humans, if I remember correctly, and it has such a cool fucking layout. Holy shit. I love how Wonder Trade looks. It's so cool. I just think it's really cool. I just think it's neat. There's the Ware Library that we already mentioned. You can find it there. And there's the Darkfang archive, which is really old and has kind of a sort of unique layout for finding things. So I did want to include it on here. I think it's defunct. I don't think it's been updated in like a really long time, but it has kind of a unique way of laying out its collection, so I did want to include it. If there is anything I want you to take away from this panel, something more important than all the technical details and the complicated moral quandaries that I've spent like the last 45 minutes trying to shove into your brains, it's this. Loss is inevitable. As an archivist, this ends up being a conclusive theme to pretty much everything I make, and it's what inspires me to keep making. There is so much we have already lost, and so much that we are yet to lose, but inevitably will. Things that it is at this point too late to save. None of us will remain in this community forever, whether we choose to leave or we simply pass on. Discord is a fleeting, difficult to archive space that we come together in once a year to share these wonderful times in this unique convention landscape. And one day this too will fade into nothing more than fond memories. The people and places in this community that you love will vanish. Maybe you'll know what happened to them. Maybe you won't. At the end of the day, we only have each other, and there is no one coming to help us but us. And we need to make that fucking count where we can and when we can. You can't save everything. You can't save everyone. But you have to try. And that's it. You've survived the panel and hopefully learned how to begin building your own archive and feel inspired to do so yourself. As always, a huge thank you to the mutant standard emoji, which I use in every lecture, as well as the Pixabay and iStock images that I've either used for free or purchased in the past. Big shout out to my amazing polycule, made up of Orion, Scribner, Thomas Shepard, and House of Chimeras, and shout out to my Metamore bite count as well, and all the other folks who I love and adore with all my heart. A big thank you to all my friends who listened to me panic about this lecture for 2 weeks straight, wondering if I'd made the scope way too fucking big. And last but not least, a huge thank you to viewers like you. I couldn't do this stuff without you, and you guys inspire me to be better each and every day. Thank you. And with that, I'm on time! Woo! We did it, gang! Yay! I have time for like maybe 5 questions if you have any. I don't know if people, oh god, I've been added in panel questions. Is the Alter Human, we think we emailed you back in 2025 with academic articles we collected. Is it worth collecting academic articles? Do you collect them too? What are the legalities of archiving academic articles? Generally, Stasis, we do not So the Alt-Human Archive is technically an index rather than a true archive, in the same way the Where library was. We don't host anything on the archive except for like copies of stuff, like copies of web pages, like links to the Internet Archive pages, and then we just kind of point to where the thing is. This is to avoid copyright issues, because I don't really have confidence that we could win a copyright fight, and I don't want the archive taken down over it. So the answer is we collect academic articles if they are already published openly online, if they are accessible and made to be so by the creator behind them. But if there's something private, like if there's something in a journal that you have to pay money for instance, we don't touch those. That's kind of the dividing line there. Question, what would be the best way to archive a Discord server / if you need to sort different sites together under one umbrella, having to mix a Tumblr blog and Discord server? I unfortunately don't know the best way to archive a Discord server. I know that it's been done. I believe Doppeldraconis has actually archived one of the old Draconic Summit Discords, I believe. But I don't know how to archive a Discord server. I do know that, I think Willow, or was it Willow? I know that the Archetroper Guild, the Otherworldly Spirituality, and oh no, I forget the third one. I know that those were all archived, but I don't quite know how. It's kind of out of my realm of expertise, because archiving Discords is a little bit new. Oh, Gortrex says you can download them with certain tools, but making that download usable sucks. Oh. Okay, Azur says DM me, so go DM Azur. There's some knowledge there. And Willow says I can find the tool I use. Excellent. Please post it in panel questions and in panel room 2 when you do. Or I don't know where that would go, but there are resources. I just don't know them. I'm very sorry. I think the resources have been kind of a long time in being made. Is there a Tumblr backup method? Not that I know of. The Tumblrs I've had to back up, I've had to manually go page by page. No, as there says there is. Yeah, because when I was backing up Tumblrs, I used to have the Internet Archive just trawl through the whole Tumblr. Which worked, but that was quite a many years ago. Is it possible to vacuum pack things like DVD and CD discs? I don't think I'd recommend that. Just based on what I've seen. You might be able to do it, but it might actually depend on the container that they are held in. I would do research on that before you decided to move forward with it, but my instincts say probably not. Yeah, like Nebula says, disc rot's mostly due to moisture and heat and light exposure to some degree. If you keep it in a cool, dry place, you should be okay. Yes, it is being recorded. I can also confirm that because I saw that was asked. Okay, and I think we got through all the actual questions. Swag. Yeah, a lot of folks, DVDs are expected to be safe for at most 100 years if stored correctly, but they shouldn't be relied on for more than like 30 years, question mark. Yeah, Poppy, I've heard the same. I've heard that specific DVDs and CDs that have gold used to make them are supposed to last for like 500 years or something ridiculous, but I 100% would not rely on them. CDs and DVDs are just really fragile. I always recommend not using them unless you have to. They can be a redundancy, but please don't make them your first option, you know? Okay, you have 1 minute left. Is there anything anyone else wants to say? For Stasis, you may have missed it. For Stasis, I did answer your question. The TLDR is We only link to academic articles if they are already publicly accessible. Otherwise, it's a copyright concern, and we're a little worried about that. And yes, there is the translation and preservation server. If you're interested in archival work, go check it out. I believe, oh, that's for your server, right, Orion?
Yes, that's my server. And also, if I may add something cool that happened in chat, the chat for your panel, Calixa created a channel in the forum, a thread in the forum rather, for Alter Humans of Color. So, folks, check it out.
Yeah! Woo! Okay, it is officially 1 p.m. I hope you guys have a great rest of the convention. Thank you so much for coming by, and I wish you all a wonderful rest of the year. Later.